Marty Lafferty, and our next guest is Sam Rosen. Sam is the Practice Director of TV and Video at ABI Research. He routinely provides actionable strategic advice to technology and investment executives based on sound research and accurate forecasting of market status and trends. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks for having me, Marty.
Now, how do you define the Internet of Things?
You know, I think it's connecting things that in some cases don't have screens. In some cases today they have screens. And especially as we're talking about content and applications, we'll be talking about things with screens. So that includes automotive. It includes a lot of the wearable sensors you're seeing. The barriers to entry have never been lower. You see the same innovation you saw around apps 3 years ago, you're starting to see around devices today.
How do media and content intersect with this new Internet of Things trend?
Yeah, I think that's the real timely question. I think that you see with all of these new device classes, the same services, be those radio, video, or lifestyle, need to engage with the device. So over time, the level of connectivity of these devices is increasing greatly. You're going from these devices having a one-to-one tether to, in some cases, IP and pass through to the cloud. So you're getting a lot of great connectivity. In many cases, the storage is by compute standards or smartphone standards limited. But if you go back to the old days where we had, you know, an IBM PC on our desk, right. I mean, you really have an immense amount of compute. So there's a tremendous amount you can do. So I think the real challenge in getting media to wearables is finding a strategy that suits your business.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what kind of strategies would be effective?
Yeah, I think you see the end-to-end strategies are the companies that a lot of people are most familiar with and think about when they think about technology. That's the Apples, the Googles, Facebook, Microsoft, Xiaomi in China. And you see new companies coming up into this ecosystem, and I think that's important. You have some device-oriented strategies that may extend into lifestyle. Fitbit is a good example of this, where it's an enabling device and then a service that rests on that device, and the goal is to reach the largest audience possible by your penetration in devices. You have content-oriented services, so that's any TV service, a Netflix, an Amazon, CBS, and I think those are important. Gaming also fits into that, Candy Crush. And I think you have service-oriented, which haven't yet begun to delve into the IoT, and those would include things like travel, banking, e-health. And I think that will be a significant wave that we see coming forward, you know, in the next 5 years, but probably not in the next 18 months to a significant level.
So talking about, you know, let's start with small wearables as opposed to automotive.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit on that.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the biggest things in wearables is the sensors that are embedded. You know, we're awash in sensors. The manufacturing technology is condensing sensors together. 2 or 3 of the innovative products I've seen at the show have been sensors around eye tracking, around mouth vibration to get noise cancellation out. And so a lot of the wearables are about sensors. You also have the smart watches that's about notification and trying to make us appear less tethered to our devices. You know, we're all very tethered to our devices, and I think our spouses wish we weren't so tethered. So hopefully wearables will give us back some of that personal relationship. You know, so if you look at the sensors, that's providing input up. If you look at the smart watches, that's taking UI and wrapping and distilling down a vast amount of information to where it's most actionable and achievable. And I think if you talk about moving content to those, it's about that. It's about providing that contextual awareness when it is most relevant.
Do you think automotive is going to be better or more complicated than that?
I think automotive is different. It's a different form factor. A lot of the constraints in automotive don't come from power considerations or screen size considerations like you have in wearables, but they come from the safety environment as well as the life cycle environment. So I don't think I spoke as much about the fragmentation in in wearables with Apple Health Kit and Google Health. And I think that the fragmentation that you see in automotive, you have MirrorLink, you have CarPlay, you have Android Auto, and companies will need to live in one or two or four of those ecosystems, and that's the developer challenge that is faced today. And I think that's very similar in the car. I think the use cases in the car, there are 3 or 4 that are really relevant. Entertainment, radio is one, navigation is one, right. And communication is a third. And I think we'll be able to get more and more of those use cases. I think the danger for developers is just reaching that base as quickly as possible and finding the architecture that allows you to penetrate customers in all of these services.
How can things get easier, particularly for developers?
Yeah, standards is number one. You know, I think Bluetooth has done a really good job with profiles and defining profiles to allow interoperability around music, around around Bluetooth headsets. I think you're starting to see Thread and All-Scene open up the connectivity for the home. We didn't speak much about IoT in the home and home automation. So I think standards are going to get there. I think the other thing is the development tools have to get better. Android is working on giving a developer tools to take the same application and extend it to a watch form factor, a smartphone form factor, a tablet form factor, and maybe a TV form factor. Hopefully Firefox, with some of its web-centric thinking, may do similar things. And so I think for all of these ecosystems to really have that same service but different UI and make it as seamless as possible to publish would make it easier.
And is there big money to be made in IoT?
Yes, there is absolutely big money. I think the content is going to follow the consumers, and so all of the content companies are struggling to get there. You have early market entry is one of the key determinants to who's going to be making the big money. So I think that's why you see this rush around velocity and this rapid experimentation of the big tech companies. And wide reach, the ability to get to enough consumers matters. You could have the best technology, and if it's in an ecosystem that's not attractive, people won't find it. And I think that well-architected services have the ability to have that nimbleness and go and find the consumers where they're there. I think the challenges to making money are that the big get bigger, and so at some level, if you're a small guy, you've got to figure out how to work within their ecosystem. I think there are steep tolls for monetization. I think that the payment systems are extracting a lot of value at the top, and so as you get further down the chain, there's less money to be made. And fundamentally, I think the industries need smartphones and devices and wearables more than the wearables need the industries. So yeah.
So how do you recommend that services adapt to this changing world?
Yeah, I think first is to know your consumer, your customer, and what you're trying to do. I would say walk before you can run. Build out scalability to an addressable audience that matters. Target your core demographic, tweak it, and get it right. And then it becomes an ROI decision about each of these new business cases that expand your scale. I think you have to know your competition. We spend a lot of time in the technology ecosystem explaining to people who their competition really is. It's often not who they define it to be. It's broader than that. And I think look for the right partners. I think that the partner ecosystem is very vibrant and can help you to achieve scale faster. So in applications, we're looking a lot at who that ecosystem is, at app tech, I would call it. You've got open source solutions, you've got solutions that are natively built into one ecosystem, and then you've got tools and frameworks that help you to build across ecosystems. And so we're looking a lot at app tech, and I think that those are the partners that you need to be seeking out.
Very good. Thanks for being with us.
Great. Thanks, Marty. Pleasure to be here.